Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Rocco LaDuca is our guest. Rocco has, despite his young age, has worn three prominent hats in this community so far. He started off at the Observer-Dispatch. He was the courts and crime reporter down there. Tough assignment. And then he went on to the staff of State Senator Joe Griffo, and now he hosts his, co-hosts his talk show 6 to 10 or 10:30?
6 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's Talk of the Town on Talk 100.7 FM, the FM dial. I've been there just a little over a year now, so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I think I'm enjoying this the most out of everything I've done so far.
Good, good. Well, you know,
because I get to interview people like you're doing right now.
Well, you know, sometimes it's a good way to make a living. Sometimes it's not. I don't know.
Well,
but
getting up at 4 a.m. isn't the best.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's start though. Just before you came to the OD, and why would and you were from Buffalo, how did somebody from Buffalo end up in Utica?
Well, I actually was Lancaster, so it's a small suburb of Buffalo, and I went to Geneseo for undergrad. I was going to be I was a bio major. I wanted to be a doctor for all these years. And then just halfway through it, I decided, you know, interviewing people, being a journalist, David Letterman was someone I looked up to for many years of my life. And the thought of interviewing somebody seemed like a great idea, a great career, but I knew I had no TV background or anything like that. So I thought, well, why don't I write? I'm a good writer. I like to interview people, so I'll get into journalism. So then when I went to Syracuse for my master's, and it was a one-year program.
Newhouse?
Newhouse, the Newhouse School there, a great school, back in 2003, 2004, and I did an internship at the OD. And it was child abuse and poverty. And so I spent the whole summer there looking at child abuse, talking to police, the criminal justice system. Very fascinating. I met a lot of people that I still talk to today, like Kevin Revere and Judge Bernadette Clark were the first people I met there. And after spending a few months there, they needed a crime and courts reporter, and that probably was not going to be the first job I would have taken or thought of taking. I think politics was what I was more interested in writing about. So they offered me the job to be a crime reporter, and then there I was. So a year later, I was working in Utica and fell in love with it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you, and I'm not speaking out of school because he's probably told this to you personally. Frank Tomeno, who was my city editor when I was at the OD all those years ago, paid you a compliment to me many years ago. He talked about how well you covered crime and courts. Not the easiest thing to cover at the OD.
Now, I think it's something that some people really hate it. I fell in love with it. I mean, it's dark and it's sad and it's tragic, but just the stories you can get of good versus bad, and you got two people fighting it out when it comes to court during the trials. You have two sides, two characters. You get to know the attorneys, and you get to write little mini stories in all of these people's lives, and I cherish all of them. There have been over 100 murders or so, more than 40, 50 murder trials I've covered, and all those stories are going to stay with me. And just to me, it wasn't depressing in a sense. It was a chance to tell these stories that happened in people's lives, that things go wrong in all of our lives at some point, and I like being able to tell those stories. You
know, my 20 years at the OD, I only had to cover a court hearing maybe 3 times, and boy, I just found it very stressful.
You did?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, just the thought of
getting all the legal terms?
Oh yeah, well that was part of it, and the thought of getting something wrong. You know, I mean, if you're writing a feature story and you get a date wrong, well, you got the date wrong, but you're covering a trial, and boy, you get a date wrong there, and that can mean big problems.
I realized that you could sit in court for 6 hours in a day for 3-4 weeks. You got a lot. You fill up your notepads. I mean, I just had stacks and stacks of pads of all the trial. And then
you still have them?
Not so much. I got rid of them when I started to look at them and realized I couldn't read my handwriting. When you're a reporter, you just got to scribble like a doctor, and years later, you don't really know how to translate it. But I realized that you're not going to get everything. So just sit, pay attention, like a juror, pay attention, take notes, careful notes. If something pops out, write that down, because you're only going to be able to fit so much into the story. And the reason why I think I never made mistakes in all of this is just write what you know. Never take a guess. Never think you understood something. If you don't feel you understood it and you can't explain it to somebody, then
don't try to.
Don't try to, right.
Well, you know, I tell you, that's some great advice to a beginning courts reporter, and I wish somebody would have given me that advice. I learned that on my own. And I think beginning reporters get in there and they try to cover everything, and that's where you get into trouble. My best stories would be when I didn't have that much in my notebook.
Yeah, no, that's when you knew, after a busy day, when you knew there were 3 or 4 quotes that were going to speak for themselves, the story spoke for itself. If you had 100 pages to go through to find something good, that's when it got a little stressful because there was so much to go through after, and you had to learn to write it in an hour or so on deadline, which isn't very easy, especially if you don't have background in criminal justice to go back and make sense of all of that. It was not easy unless you've been doing it for years. So like I said, I really enjoyed it, and nowadays you don't really put so much. I watch the new reporters in court sometimes, and everyone's tweeting things, and they're documenting the whole trial in tweets, and I'm still writing it down because I'm more comfortable that way.
And do they go back? When I started, I was writing in a manual typewriter, to show you my age, but do they use those tweets, those live tweets, to then go back to the newsroom and write their story?
Well, a lot of the times, well, like I said, I still write it in notebooks, but a lot of the other reporters don't use notebooks. That's I guess they're transcribing. Those are their notes. And I actually sometimes go back and look at them if I feel I missed something. I'll go look and compare other reporters, and everyone does a great job. This area has a lot of great reporters out there. They don't stay around too long, which is sad, because if I had left after 2 years of being here, which was on my mind within a few years, just like move on to something bigger, I would have never reached, I think, the level of experience and expertise and friendships and relationships and understanding that I think really makes reporting being such a rewarding experience when you're familiar with the area, the people, and you really know what's going on. And if you leave after a few years, you really miss out on that. Yeah.
We've only got a minute here, but one of the biggest, I hate to ask a question, what was the biggest case? But what was one of the biggest cases you covered?
Well, actually this past week was the 33rd anniversary of Kim Simon's death and her disappearance and death. Steve Barnes, we've all heard the story. He went on trial, he was convicted, and spent almost 20 years in prison. And he got out after DNA proved that he was wrongfully convicted. And actually this, in November, will be 10 years that he's been out a free man now, and so I'd love to be able to talk to him, maybe have him on the show and look at what this past decade has been like for him, because he's been through a lot. And I still hope that I'm here one of these days, they'll be able to finally find out, bring justice for Kimberly Simon and her family in terms of what really happened to her and who took her life.
Yeah. When we come back, let's talk about your time with Senator Griffo. 2 years, 3 years?
Hopefully he's not listening. A little under 3 years.
All right. Rocco DeLuca is our guest. Short break, right back.